Charlie Kirk died, y'all. I don't know if you did know or not, but Charlie Kirk, a man I really wasn't familiar with until he passed away, was killed. I'm not gonna say assassinated. I know some people have said assassinated. I'm not gonna use that type of verbiage with a podcast. I'm sorry, but he was murdered, and his murder has had a lot of ramifications. So first off, I'll start. Uh, K. Clark, how do you feel about the fallout from his passing away?
Uh, well, the fallout itself, I guess, is I mean, what we're watching is, I think it's an attempt, was an attempt by the GOP to use his death as a way to uh, further the fascism. Let's be blunt about it. I think you see that in the way that they're trying to literally cancel uh, ordinary citizens. Never mind Jimmy Kimmel, we'll get to in a minute. Everyday citizens, whether that's like your JD Vance going on Charlie Kirk's show, it's just saying you can see somebody making comments about Charlie Kirk that are negative, report them basically to their boss. Uh, you know, part of it is great against cancel culture is literally trying to cancel people. So there's that. I think we're also seeing the martyrdom happen, which tends to happen regardless of his political lines. If somebody's a big of a political figure, which I consider him that in a way. He wasn't an official, and he had that pull with people, particularly younger people. Um, and I think we're seeing, a rebrand in real time, an attempted one, because I mean, everybody's trying. This church that posted an AI video of him, his quote unquote last word, and saying like quotation marks for people that aren't watching because it wasn't his last words, it's AI. You got other religious leaders and people, officials like Mike Johnson and JD Vance that said, and Trump and just Republican senators and officials saying he was, uh, a man who wasn't faithful and spread love and wanted to encourage people to come together and engage in peaceful in doing politics the right way, as a New York Times piece by Israel Klein said. So in my view, we're seeing a modern day version of the lost cause. Those who don't know what that is, after the Civil War and after the South lost and the Confederacy and the Confederate generals and prominent figures will rightly look at as, losers and traitors and people who want to preserve a way of life that included enslaving folks. Not that the North was all that good, but compared to the South, yeah. Um, there was an organization called the Daughters of the Confederacy that decided that we with that shit, we can try to rebrand these niggas. So what they did over the decades is just they created this idea to create this doctrine that create this idea that these people weren't actually, fused as losers. They were actually and racist. They were people who were fighting a noble cause. And over time, they tried to put us into schools, into curriculums, but also statutes. So all the statutes that we see all these controversies over the past 18 years or so that have been, people trying to take them down. People said, no, it's not heritage. It's not hate, it's heritage. That all started with a lot of started with the lost cause. And I think we're seeing a version of that with Charlie Kirk is that, the softening of his image and his rougher edges, the attempt to show me this like this compassionate, moderate, he just want everybody to come together and would talk with anybody in a reasonable debate. We're seeing the same thing, a version of that. To create this perfect martyr and to cudgel people into silence that actually have, who have eyes and ears that actually see what he was and the type of man that he was and the things that he said. So that's my thoughts about it.
Yeah, I mean that sums it up pretty well. You're seeing his image be um, put somewhat on a pedestal and be kind of
Mm-hmm.
sanitized. Like I saw an interview with Jamie Lee Curtis. She was crying and said he was a man of faith. I'm
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
like, I guess, like, I mean, I'm sure he did believe in God, but
And
that
I
didn't.
think, yeah,
No, go
that's
ahead.
that's what's frustrating about it is like a lot of liberals are cow challenge, particularly white liberals cow challenge that that decency, that decorum shit. And it's like you can, like I can hold space for people that feels genuinely that I can hold space to say that he shouldn't have died that way, that was fucked up, that was a whole way to die like that. If anybody watching the video, I mean, that's taking one to the neck, pretty violent, pretty terrible. And I'm sure the students that saw that, that's probably gonna be an image of never get out of their heads for the rest of their lives. I can hold space for that while also saying that he was a terrible human being who said terrible, shitty things. If we can do both. You don't have to just performance of grief that I see a lot of people, a lot of liberals doing, in order to be seen as a good person, quote unquote. I believe.
Yeah, I'm in a space where you don't have to give a fuck. Like, like, I mean,
Young
you really
bloods.
don't. I mean, you don't have to give a fuck. Like, I mean, if you choose to mourn his passing, but you didn't agree with what he said, uh, I kind of think the best way to do it is maybe quietly. Um, it's just one of those things where I feel like you can maybe do that in your own personal space, but I think when you go online and you make such a show of it. And I guess we can kind of segue to Jimmy Kimmel a little. That's kind of why I don't really feel so much remorse for him, kind of, because he was one of those people who was, it was like the usual suspects in one regard, like Obama, this type of thing is disgusting. Da, 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 da. Then Joe Biden, Kamala. Then you start hearing from the celebrities, and he was one of the ones to say that what happened that wasn't right, and da 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 da. Da, which is I get some people feel like they have to say it. I'm one of the people who feel like you don't really have to say shit if no one
Well,
asks you.
I would say
But
in terms of the politicians, I think there's a they probably feel a need to say it because if they don't say it, then the people say, why isn't Obama saying anything? Why is Joe Biden saying anything? Why is Kamala silent? I can see why they feel a need to release some boilerplate statement about, how this is
well,
should be,
honestly,
should
I
be,
think that's probably how they really feel too.
and maybe, yeah,
Uh,
could be, yeah.
I mean,
I
because those people are all in the same group think. Even
mm,
though Charlie Kirk wasn't an actual politician, he still was in those spaces. He was one of Trump's favorite people. He was
mhm.
allowed into that circle, even though he had no real role. He had a lot of influence. So all those people, interacted and engaged in some way. I really feel like most of the outrage is because he probably was going to be the next chosen one. He probably was going to eventually become. I'm not saying he was going to become president, but he probably was going to try to run for some type of office eventually.
Well,
Uh,
in a way, he's kind of a combination of Rush Limbaugh, who he was inspired by, and someone like with a dash of like the religiosity. Because Rush Limbaugh, I don't think was particularly religious, but they have sort of shock jocks. I'm gonna say the things and say the quote unquote PC things that around the liberals up and draw young people to me in particular. And also, like I said, the religious part of it. So he kind of is a mix of like past people that did similar things.
Yeah, he was. He was a hodgepodge. A lot of those
Mm.
people, like kind of like yeah, like the politics, the political vigor of like Rush Limbaugh, but then like the controversial hot takes of maybe like or the antics, kind of like what not sexual, but kind of like shot jock, kind of like Howard Stern type shit. Like even because even like Joe Rogan doesn't really. Joe Rogan is political, but he doesn't really claim to be a part of any party. He just
Mm.
claims to be like someone who's a deep thinker, who's outside of the matrix, and he's just looking at it from above. But Kirk kind of implanted himself into MAGA, and he became like a MAGA knight or whatever, however you want to phrase. It. He became like a
Yeah,
follower
yeah.
of it.
Mhm. A
And
mover.
he
Yeah.
yeah, a mover, and I think when you see someone with that much influence and then they die, it's kind of like what happens next. Everything's shaking. So people are obviously serious. They've shaken up about it because I've seen both sides kind of berate. It's an interesting paradox online. Like you have people who are kind of like, oh well, what y'all having for dinner, and then you got people who are mourning, and then you got people who see the other people who are acting like a bit celebratory about it, kind of get mad at those people and try to condemn them or call them heartless, cold, whatever. And I think it's so odd to see because it's like if you want to mourn him, whatever, but you can't erase the fact that man said some really fucked up shit and had a lot of fucked up ideas and stuff, versus people who felt like they were harmed by what he said. So now that he's gone, they're kind of like, well, good riddance. You kind of got to hold, like you said about holding space. You also have to hold space for the fact that he was saying some wild shit, and he also kind of, I'm not gonna say he asked to be shot in the neck, but he did invite violence. You know what I'm saying? So,
He died the way that he wanted to live. Is my perspective. It's like he believed that a certain amount of gun deaths are bound to happen, and it's a fact of life in a country where he believes that we should have a strong Second Amendment. And so I don't know. He thought he would be one of those gun deaths, but that's what it would happen.
fucked
And I
around and
was
found out.
right, and I will say that I don't want that. I mean, the reason why it is a horrible. I don't want. I'm not glad that happened to him because I don't want it to be a. Because if that happens, then you have the fallout and the potential retaliation of other potential assassination of other public figures, which is not good because that increases that increases the tension and the violence even more. Like a powder keg. And there's also the fact that you saw just a few days after that because who went on lockdown? HBCUs. We ain't in it. They ain't got nothing to do with black folks, but we tend to bear the brunt of fragile white feelings. You know, so I don't. It's definitely not good for that reason. As well. But yeah, just this that I saw a lot of that online, just in different celebrities, and just this like public shame. It's attempt to shame people, feeling sorry for somebody who would piss on me if I was on fire, and
Right.
probably
We
would,
don't
and,
give a
prob-
fuck
and,
about
and-
you.
right, and probably would blame me for the fire. You know, so
Right.
I don't pretend to be in mourning when I'm not in mourning. I don't grieve out. I'm not grieving, and I feel the same way about him that I felt about Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell and Rush Limbaugh and shoot. And I just white man, I put Ike Turner in there too. At least he gave us music. He gave introduced us a team. Shit.
I would have expected that, but
But I
yeah,
would say
I get
I
you.
don't discriminate in that sense. Like if you trend if you trend more towards being a shitty person than being a terrible person, and particularly if you're a public figure person, like this is his platform. Like this is like they talk about his legacy. This is his legacy. Encouraging racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia and xenophobia. That's what he profited on. That's what he built his platform on. And that's what he was continuing to do. And his last words were literally gang violence. You know, as a dog whistle talking about how, gang violence, that's what refers to, black people, why we was kill each other, we violent, we thugs. So I mean, I can't feel them for him. I can't go there with you. And it's fine not to if you don't, because empathy, yes, but he's viewed as a weakness. Doesn't mean you should have it was empathy for everybody necessarily. It means that you try to set with your own humanity, definitely, but like trying to perform grief for somebody that actually contributed to you know endangering you in the society we live in. It's understandable to feel some relief. You know that person is no longer here to do harm. That's a taboo thing, maybe a taboo thought or type thing to say. It's understandable that people would be like, okay, man, it's fucked up, but still.
Right. And when it comes to people having ramifications for saying that they don't give a fuck, I feel like that's a bit extreme as well because people are witch hunting people who are having opinions about his passing away and going around and doxing them or making sure they get fired from jobs. So I mean the largest example of that is Jimmy Kimmel,
Mm.
who on an episode of his show made a joke about it, but it was kind of lame. It was tame as
Yeah,
hell. Like
yeah, it's
it
pretty
wasn't
light.
even inflammatory. Yeah, like basically he said that MAGA is using the reveal of the killer to, basically kind of like, well, basically what he said. So they were basically, he said the person who did it wasn't who we expected it was,
Mm.
but MAGA is trying to like, use
Distance
it,
is really.
yeah,
Mm.
distance themselves from it. So it was something along those lines. He didn't outright come out and say, "Yeah, I'm glad Charlie Kirk did," because he didn't make a vile joke because he was one of the people who we said earlier came out and condemned the act of the violence that took place that killed him. So what I see it as is just power flexing. It's Trump and the FCC pretty much flexing the muscles to pretty much just force whatever they want to see. You know,
Well, yeah,
um,
it's an
and
authoritarian move. It's a I mean it's a attempt to like no, I mean low key is probably like attempt to push towards a version of like state media in a way. Any media that you don't like that criticizes the people in power is deemed, terrible or bad or horrible, and they try and it's to suppress it. Like the custom public broadcasting, like the fact that, so much media is controlled by a handful of corporations, the thesis to all that, this is
right,
what's one
and,
more piece.
right, and you saw what happened to Stephen Colbert earlier
Hmm.
this year,
Yeah.
with him. And honestly, his is a bit deeper because it wasn't necessarily because what he said about Trump. Is more so about Paramount trying to make a deal with I forgot the company's name, but they're trying to merge, and they need to play nice or as nice as possible so
Hmm.
Trump can allow it to happen. So if you got a guy on nighttime TV talking about a guy that you're trying to appease so he can make this merger happen, then you kind of gotta be like, hey, shut the fuck up. And also, they cover it up and said it was for cost measures, and nobody really watches late night TV, which is somewhat true. It's not a big thing like it was, even 10 years ago, versus the 2000s and 90s. But it's a way for them to try to cut some costs as well. So we've seen these people, these public figures in that realm attack, but Kimmel just took the brunt force of it. Kimmel was basically removed like scorched earth, and it's a bit unprecedented. Well, I'm not gonna say it's unprecedented because it kind of happened to Bill Maher too, when he had a show on ABC called Politically Incorrect, and he made comments about 9/11, and it was kind of like, well, basically the U.S. they're not innocent in this. And then they
Hmm.
say, his show was removed, it was
Hmm.
canceled. So this isn't something we've never seen before, but it's more so the fact that it was done so quickly and the way it was done, like it was just pretty much like a bully move, like you said, an authoritative move to flex power. But I don't want to make Jimmy Kimmel into a martyr. That's what I don't want to do because I'm not saying Jimmy Kimmel is an outright shitty person, but Jimmy Kimmel ain't no fucking civil rights leader or nothing like that. You know what I'm saying? He also, if you look at his career, and people probably oblivious to this, or they probably erase it from their mind, but Jimmy Kimmel was responsible for a lot of humor that now people call cancel.
Two
Uh,
words, man show.
exactly. And a lot of that humor was like very obscene, very sexist, not
Not an Asian
outright
guy.
racist. Yeah, not outright racist, but little hints of racist, little racism sprinkled in on it. You know what I'm saying? So I don't feel sorry for this motherfucker at all. If anything, this is actually a great career move for him because similar to Conan O'Brien in the tens when he was supposed to get the Tonight Show, then Jay Leno was like, "Ha, no,
Yoink.
I don't want to leave." Yeah, yoink. You saw a whole online just campaign, save Coco, save Conan O'Brien. It was really, I mean, it catapulted his career. He got interviews with Oprah. He got, he went off the grid for a little bit. Then he came back. He had a deal with TBS. The dude, he flourished. So Jimmy Kimmel now is even in a better space because nowadays, shit, he could go straight to YouTube. He could do his own fucking thing. He could Patreon. He probably get picked up by like Netflix or somebody. He has a lot of wiggle room to make this work in his favor. Now, like I said, I don't support what Trump and them did to him, but I'm not gonna act like Jimmy Kimmel is some fucking martyr or some civil rights advocate who was taking one for the people. No, I'm not gonna act like that.